Lord Chelmsford, commanding general of British forces during the Anglo-Zulu War, launched his campaign into Zululand using 3 separate invasion columns. The central column, numbering roughly 7,800 men, fell under his personal command. The strategy was built around encircling the Zulu army and compelling it into open battle. Chelmsford feared that Zulu warriors might bypass his forces entirely and strike directly at Natal instead. At the core of his army stood 12 seasoned regular infantry companies, disciplined and battle-tested. Alongside them served around 2,500 African auxiliaries, drawn from the Natal native contingent, a significant portion of whom were exiled or displaced Zulus. The force was rounded out by irregular colonial cavalry and an artillery detachment equipped with 6 field guns and a complement of Congreve rockets. Driven by the political urgency that Sir Bartle Frere had attached to the campaign, Chelmsford pushed the invasion forward during the rainy season, a decision that carried severe consequences, reducing the British advance to a sluggish crawl through waterlogged terrain. The Zulu army, though shaped by a deeply embedded warrior tradition, was fundamentally a citizen militia, mobilized only in times of national need. Its capacity to sustain prolonged field operations was limited. Warriors could remain under arms for only a few weeks before domestic and agricultural obligations drew them back home. Most Zulu fighters carried the iconic assegai thrusting spear and a cowhide shield, with only a small number carrying old muskets or outdated rifles. Firearms were far from the norm across the general Zulu force. British planners had timed the invasion to coincide with the harvest season, hoping to catch Zulu warriors scattered across their farmlands. Fate, however, intervened in favor of the Zulu king, Cetshwayo. His army had already begun gathering at Ulundi for the annual first fruits ceremony. On the 17th of January, Cetshwayo dispatched his main impi, approximately 24,000 strong, from near present-day Ulundi, directing them across the White Mfolozi River. His orders were measured and deliberate: advance steadily, strike at daybreak, and destroy the British soldiers. Under the command of Nchinwayo Kamahole, the Zulu force traveled in 2 parallel columns, spaced several miles apart, a formation designed to reduce the risk of being caught off guard. Ahead of them moved mounted scouts and warrior screening parties around 300 men strong, tasked with ensuring the main columns remained undetected. The British, meanwhile, established camp at Isandlwana, but conspicuously failed to comply with standing orders to fortify their position. No defensive laager was constructed. Chelmsford dismissed the necessity, remarking that building one would take the better part of a week. This decision reflected a broader failure of judgment, a systematic underestimation of the enemy. With more than 4,000 men at the camp, including roughly 2,000 British infantrymen armed with Martini-Henry rifles and supported by artillery, Chelmsford was convinced that his firepower alone was more than enough to repel any Zulu assault, regardless of numbers. His attention was focused on logistics, not on the possibility that the camp could come under serious attack. After establishing the camp, Chelmsford dispatched 2 battalions of the Natal native contingent to scout ahead. They made contact with what appeared to be an advanced Zulu force, and Chelmsford, misreading this as the enemy's main body, split his command. At dawn on January 22nd, he marched out with around 2,800 soldiers in pursuit, entirely unaware that this engagement was a deliberate diversion designed to draw him away from the true threat. Left behind to hold Isandlwana were just over 1,300 men and 2 artillery pieces, placed under the command of Brevet Lieutenant Colonel Henry Pullane, with orders to defend the camp and await further instructions. At around 7 a.m., cavalry scouts operating roughly 11 kilometers from camp reported sighting groups of Zulus estimated at around 4,000 men. Reports continued to arrive through the morning, each describing Zulu movements of varying scale in the surrounding terrain. Officers debated whether these forces were heading to strike Chelmsford's rear or advancing directly on the camp. Then, at approximately 10:30 a.m., Colonel Anthony Durnford arrived from Rorke's Drift with 500 additional men. Despite having a paralyzed left arm, the legacy of wounds suffered at Bushman's River Pass, Durnford acted decisively. He and Pullane agreed that a Zulu column appeared to be moving against Chelmsford's rear, and Durnford rode out with his men to intercept it. The situation changed catastrophically around 11 a.m., when British troops, pursuing a group of Zulus over a ridge, found themselves staring down into a valley occupied by nearly 20,000 Zulu warriors, sitting in near-perfect silence. The main impi had been found, or rather, it had allowed itself to be found. The Zulu force immediately surged forward. Pullane deployed companies of the 24th Regiment of Foot into an extended firing line to meet the assault head-on, trusting that disciplined volleys would check the advance. For the better part of an hour, the tactic held. Sustained British rifle fire pinned down the Zulu center, inflicting significant casualties and momentarily halting the forward momentum. Morale within the British line remained solid, and the Martini-Henry proved its destructive power at range. Royal artillery shells forced entire Zulu regiments to shelter behind the reverse slope of a nearby hill. But the Zulu left horn was swinging wide, moving to encircle the British right flank. Durnford's men, having fought longest, began to tire. Their rate of fire dropped, and they fell back toward the main camp. The encirclement tightened. What followed was savage close-quarters fighting, with no quarter asked or given. At 2:29 p.m., a total solar eclipse plunged the battlefield into an unnatural darkness, casting an almost surreal shadow over the carnage below. A Zulu account recalled a group of 24th Regiment soldiers forming a final square on the saddle of Isandlwana hill. Durnford's men, who had possessed horses and could conceivably have escaped, instead died alongside him in a last stand. Their horses were found still tethered to their picket ropes. Multiple desperate final stands were made across the camp. Archaeological evidence and the cairns marking burial sites today show that large clusters of bodies were found grouped together throughout the position. Of the force exceeding 1,800 British troops and African auxiliaries, more than 1,300 were killed, the majority of them Europeans. Zulu losses were estimated somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 dead, though no reliable count was ever recorded. When word finally reached Chelmsford that his camp had been overrun, he was visibly shaken. "But I left 1,000 men to guard the camp," he reportedly said, struggling to comprehend what had occurred. The disaster at Isandlwana reverberated all the way to London. The British government moved swiftly, dispatching massive reinforcements to Natal and sending General Garnet Wolseley to relieve Chelmsford of command, though Wolseley arrived only after the war's final engagement had already been fought. In a bitter irony, Chichivuyo's stunning victory that day ultimately sealed his fate. The scale of the British defeat made a devastating retaliatory campaign not just likely, but inevitable.